Okay, recording has started. Feel free to continue or call a meeting. Claire, you're muted.
Sorry about that, Missy. Are you able to hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you, and we do see the PowerPoint with the full lighting, not just the presentation.
Now is this presentation? Thank you.
Okay, this is Chairman Waddell calling the meeting to order on November 13th at 13:03. I'll go through a quick roll call. Nicholas Barraza. Robert Carpenter.
Present.
Robbie Hanovich.
Present.
Andrew Schaus.
I'm present.
Chris Steckel.
Spelke, yes.
Spelke.
Present.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Colby White. Okay, that gives us a quorum, if I'm counting right. And then city staff, Lori Matthews,
Here.
Heidi Hansen. Brian Gall,
Present.
Adam, I'm gonna screw it up, Miley,
Close. Mealy.
Meow,
Present.
okay. Claire Harper,
Present.
Tim Skinner,
Present.
Missy Shaner,
Present.
Okay, we'll go on to the preliminary business, public comment and participation. Do we have anybody online that's gonna do that?
That's I'm aware.
Okay. Okay, any announcements? Preliminary announcements or anything? Oh,
We can introduce.
you want to introduce yourself, Chris?
Sure. Thanks for having me here presently. And I've been moved to Flagstaff from Denver 3 years ago. My previous career was working with Denver Housing Authority, doing public-private partnerships, doing federal funds. And so I've been looking way to serve and appointed, I guess, 2 months ago, but we had October commissioners meetings canceled. So it's good to meet you all and to be on the board and happy to serve.
Well,
Welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate your signing up for this. I think you'll enjoy it. Especially the airport crew that runs this. They're all great people. We owe them a great big debt of gratitude. They work really hard out here for very little recognition and thanks. So we appreciate that.
Small but mighty team.
That's it. Oh, I like that. You guys need t-shirts. Okay. Approval of the minutes. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
This is Commissioner Hanovich. I motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, and Chris, would you like the second?
I will second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved as submitted. And city council update.
Hi. One thing that affects the airport is that on December 2nd, the airport parking fees will be presented for a motion to approve for the city council, and then final approval, if passed, will be on the 16th. Might be advantageous for you all to either be online and make comments as people start asking questions, or show your support or your feedback. The city is also reviewing increasing their parking fees downtown. So that may bring some interest in additional public comments. Also, you may all know that we have a new city manager. Greg Clifton retired as of the end of last month. And we did a national search, and we ended with Joanne Keene, who was our deputy city manager. And so now she's in the process over the next couple of months looking to fill her spot. So that's always exciting when there's new management coming in, because they bring in maybe different fresh ideas and different perspectives and stuff. So I had a meeting with her today, and so far so good. No, I really like Joanna, and I think she'll do a great job. And the only other hot topic that I'm aware of, and there's always a surprise, is the ongoing discussion with flock cameras. That's a license plate reader we've had in place for over a year. NAU's had them on campus for over 3 years. Coconino County themselves have had it for several years, but it gained some interest with some misuse back initially across the nation. But it has solved some murders and a 1-year-old kidnapping, shooting. That's just in the last 2 months. So, but there is a lot of public comment and concern. Some of it's misinformation, some of it's legitimate concern. We are forming a citizen advisory council to keep an watchdog eye on our IT and our security levels to make sure there's no breaches in security or misuse, although we have a pretty strict protocol. Our chief understands the community, and sometimes we forget that we're not just this little bedroom community. We actually are the intersection between the 17 and the 40. There's a whole lot of trafficking that goes on here, and a whole lot of criminals pass through our streets going from one state to the next. And I guess it's a good thing it's not publicized until conversations like this come up and people don't realize just how much happens and is caught here in Flagstaff. So we'll see where it goes. But that's really all I have to update.
Thanks, Lori. Appreciate it. Okay. And shall we go on to the operations updates?
Sounds good. We've got a couple of months to share here. As I was mentioned earlier, the October meeting was canceled, so we'll go over numbers from September and October in today's updates. So enplanements, as a reminder, enplanements are revenue passengers boarding flights. October's enplanements were up 4.4% over 2024, and September's enplanements were up 7.7% over 2024. So 2024, for anybody's recollection, was the 4th highest passenger traffic we ever had at the airport, highest with a single carrier. So the highest we had with just American Airlines and its predecessors serving Flagstaff. And year to date, our enplanements are up 5.5%. So we are tracking really good to set that kind of 4th highest year record again. The big question looming of being the impacts of the shutdown and its associated impacts on air travel, which we have a whole presentation on later. So I'll go into more detail on that for what we're expecting in the coming months. But year to date, looking pretty strong, with enplanements up 5.5%. Oh, and it should be noted that enplanements are up 5.5% despite seat capacity going down a little bit. We've lost a couple of flights. Not really a couple of flights per day, really a couple per month. If you look at the month over month data from last year to this year, starting in the summertime, I think the airlines were expecting a little bit of a downturn. But despite having fewer seats available on a monthly basis, we are seeing more passenger traffic. It says a lot to the demand in Flagstaff. Also, I think pricing has an impact on that. We have heard sort of anecdotally that airline ticket prices have come down a little bit, and I think that is helping drive some of the passenger traffic.
Is this one of the statistics that airlines look at for if they're considering increasing or coming in the Flagstaff? Is this one of the things you guys present at those kind of meetings?
In part, we do present the enplanement data. They kind of drill down even a little bit further into that. So the main things that we've seen air carriers look at are a metric. Well, they look at the load factor, right? So not just the number of people, but what percentage of the seats are selling. sort of how strong the market is at filling those routes that already exist. But the other one is a metric called PDU, which stands for per day each way. So it's, you look at our studies and it shows the demand and traffic from a certain city to Flagstaff in just terms of numbers of people per day that want to travel. That'll kind of educate whether a route might be daily or something less than daily. And if there's going to be enough people that want to go between those two cities to fill the seats, that would be on a route like that.
Can I add something to that? Because I went on the summer, I went to one of the conferences where we were reporting with other airlines. And I was really impressed being a layman in the airline industry, but our consultant pulled data that shows for each airline where their hub is, maybe Denver or something, they were able to pull data and say, this is how many people are leaving Northern Arizona to go fly out of Phoenix to go to your hub, which helps them see, oh, if I had, a plane here, here's how many percentage, and to be able to capture that data was fascinating to me. But it was really impressive because we wouldn't just say pie in the sky stuff. It's like, 78 people a day or whatever that number was. And so they could have very absolute factual information, which I thought was helpful. We still don't have another airline, but I thought it was impressive.
We're working on it.
We're
We're
working.
working on it. Any other questions on employments? So total operations are, each takeoff and landing is counted as an operation. So for October, operations were up pretty significantly with a 19.3% increase over 2024. With September's being sort of the opposite, with a little bit of a downturn on a 1.3% decrease from 2024. Year to date, though, operations are looking strong with a 13.6% increase over 2024. I don't know, Orville maybe in his update might have some information on what we're seeing from the GA general aviation traffic side. A lot of that has to do with weather. A lot of it has to do with sort of external economic factors. I'm not sure I have a great answer for the strong October that we saw. So I'd be curious if Orville has anything when we get to those updates.
That's coming at the top.
Correct, counted by our air traffic control tower.
When it is manned.
Parking revenue, and this was a note for anybody who missed our last meeting that we have revised the previous parking numbers. Missy did kind of a deep dive into parking to make sure our data was accurate. And we found that the numbers that were being added previously were reflecting payment reconciliation dates rather than actual transaction dates, which resulted in a little bit of a shift of sometimes what days transactions that were around the end of the month were showing up. So that's all been corrected back to the start of the parking system. So thanks, Missy, for that. So if you see any difference in numbers from the historical, if you look back at previous presentations, that's why we found that little hiccup there and corrected that. So October's parking revenue is up 4.6% at $52,506, which is a pretty strong month for us. And September's parking revenue is significantly up at about 27.6% over 2024's numbers. Year to date, parking revenue is up 13.6%. And that, tracks relatively closely with the employments. We are seeing that employment increase, though a little bit higher. So it's, if you look back at this, one of the things that had challenged us before is we were not seeing a lot of correlation in parking revenue with employment data, which we thought that we would see, employments being people boarding planes. So you think the parking revenue would lag a little bit as people return from their trips and pay for parking, but we weren't seeing a strong correlation as we thought. But with the revised updated data, we do see a stronger correlation between employments and parking. So it makes sense that since we're up on employments, we're also up on parking.
And this will be something that we'll look at after maybe 6 months from now, look at how the new rates, if they have impacted. We get that.
Correct. Yeah. So for, some of that depends on the council conversation. I think that's Councilmember Matthews mentioned. Obviously, we're going to make some recommendations. We're going to take part of the conversation that we had in these commission meetings to them, but there is some council discretion there to go a different direction if they choose to do so. But as recommended, those new parking rates, other than the lost ticket fee and the monthly parking fee, wouldn't take effect until July of next year. So beyond that, we would do some updates if we did. If we do end up moving to those rates or some different rates than we have now, we'll definitely track that and see how it's going compared to what we have today.
And I imagine there's some consideration around the typical parking down in Phoenix, right? For people driving versus parking here, there's probably some consideration around keeping it lower so you get more flight.
There is, we tracked, and I can share some of this with you offline as well, because I know some of this conversation happened before your time on the commission, but we have a report that went with it, and we analyzed 10 nearby airports, kind of see what they're charging and sort of how our rates compare to everybody else, with the goal of ultimately making ours be enough that we can cover our operational expenses that we're incurring, or the airport needs on a revenue basis, while also being on the low end of what some of our neighbors are charging, especially at the bigger airports. So fuel flow is gallons of fuel dispersed at the airport. October's fuel flow was up 15.1%. September fuel flow was down 2.7% in 2024, which tracks relatively closely with those total operational numbers that we saw a couple slides ago. Any questions on any of those? That's what we have for operational updates. Thank you.
Okay, Orville, you're up.
Thank you. Haven't been here in a while.
Neither.
Apologize, I'm just getting over, not feeling great, and so I didn't, give you a slight thing. We'll start with business. It's been a pretty busy football. I mean, any of you actually kind of started late, but I would say we've had more airliner class aircraft on the ramp this fall than we've ever had, between the various different things that have been going on, private charters and Avelo and business Boeing jets and stuff like that. But we've got NEU, we have an inbound team coming. They fly in on Legion Airbus 320 typically on Friday, then fly out on Saturday. We've got one more of those. NEU flies out the week after that. If they continue to play the way they are, these last two games, they will make the playoffs. And so, because they'll be one of the bottom seeds, they will have to go somewhere else. So then we will probably end up with that horrible football charter ordeal on Thanksgiving. But that's okay. I'll take it. So we have more of that. As a side note to that, and it ties into my equipment report. Twice this year, those planes aren't used to sitting for as long as they do here. And how do I put this nicely? The batteries die and they can't start the Airbuses. And it happened twice this year. I'm not kidding. And so that takes a different type of power card. It takes an AC power card instead of a DC power card, which we already have. And to be totally candid, the airline's been a little nasty about letting us use it. We used it twice. We had to get the bigger unit. 2 games back, the battery's so dead, the team didn't leave till 2 a.m. because they had to sit there and wait for the APU to charge up everything before they went any further with their starts and so forth. So my son, who works part-time for Allegiant, was on me early season. Dad, we have to buy a power card. I go, are you freaking nuts? Those things are 6 figures. Our fancy $107,000 power card showed up today. Yeah. And it's the big one. It's the 400 megahertz. So it will start at anything. Like we had an Airbus 400 come in here one time and need a power card. If you've ever seen one of those, it's like a turboprop C-17. I mean, it'll pretty much start anything. It's fine. It's dual, so it's DC and AC. It's kind of funny. I wired the money out. It didn't ship when it was supposed to. Maybe it dealt me when I'm not real happy. Know that I'm not real happy. They loaded it. I can't believe this. They loaded it Tuesday in Connecticut, put a hotshot truck, and it showed up last night here.
Nice.
Yeah, but we're real excited about that. And now we have another operational issue, which is with fuel in it weighs over 5,000 pounds. And it's pretty impressive when you look inside. Those orange carts are rated for 2,200 pounds. So we're either gonna have to buy like an agricultural type tractor to pull it with. We're probably just gonna pull it a little 1/2 ton for now, but we don't like the limited visibility in it. But that was a big deal. Honestly, the only thing we don't have left is a huffer cart for starts, because we've got the DC and the AC. So we're looking good there. Of course, we got the stairs 2 years ago. With the football, 2 years, last year I said, I'm done with the back of the parking lot looking like a SWAT team. We're gonna have to start busting out. So we did that all last year. Somebody high up in Athletic said, hey, that's really costing us a lot of money. Can we go back to parking behind the FBO? I said, yes and no. So I said, this is how many cars you're allowed. I want passes in the windows, and I want the cars out of the parking lot by Sunday morning. And that's gone extremely well this year, and it worked out well anyway. I went out and bought, I don't know, several $1,000s of blue and yellow delineators, because I thought we'd be walking the team from the parking lot to down the ramp. But it rained the first two NAU departures, so we ended up having to screen everybody in the hangar and everything anyway, so we just parked the jet out front. So that's going well. Shop's busy. Staffing is real strong. And in fact, we've got some guys that work for us, a couple are on the team that want to come back and work for us. And so that's going really well. Fuel volumes are strong. And I'll just talk about business in general, having been here 27 years, whatever. I've always said my season is Easter to Thanksgiving. And typically what happens is we peak in June and then we slide a little bit in the summer months, with October typically being our second busiest month on my numbers. This was a really unusual year in that we had a decent June, like it wasn't subpar. Then July came along, was better than June. Then August came along, was better than July or June. And then September we had a slump. I don't know why, but October came back pretty strong. So I would say, Brian, that it isn't all that unusual. Maybe by your numbers, but I can tell you by my fuel flow numbers and stuff, that's pretty typical. It doesn't always hold true, but I mean, we're on track for a very strong year this year. No complaints there. We finally got our new fuel truck, our 5,000 gallon fuel truck. I don't know if those of you work here at the airport see it driving around. It's very new and very nice. It's got a lot of electronic stuff on it. Already had a couple of issues, but GPU arrived. Something else with the football charters and the one with the events I'm going to talk about here is, you know, we're out there almost always in the dark loading the team. We put the Airbus down near the ramp here, just south of Whiskey. It's, even though you have those lights, it's really, really dark. And you got TSA screeners out there and all this stuff going on. Speaking of which, TSA showed up and did surprise inspection on the NAU departure. I think they were extremely pleased from what I saw and how everything was handled. That's something you don't want. You know, well, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You're on a football team and you're not in a secured area like this. I mean, we've got delineators up, we got gold chains pulled through them and all that stuff, but still, you just got to make sure you aren't leaving gates open. You're challenging anybody that's walking in the wrong place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he seemed happy. I don't know. I mean, we didn't hear any more about it. Anyway, going back to the whole screen thing is I decided to buy a light tower, which it also arrived today, but they rented me one at a half price. And if I had done the screen presentation, I came out after the game Saturday night and it was incredible. I mean, everything is just super well illuminated. You got the 3 buses out there, you got the tables, you know, and then we've been using it in the dirt lot behind the FBO for the most recent functions, because I'm always scared that somebody's gonna fall and get hurt. Which is probably gonna end up getting sued too in that back dirt lot. So, and it works well. The team's parked back there again, everything's well illuminated. So because I missed a few things, and I know I've talked since then, but I don't think I mentioned it. Just some of the things that have gone on that weren't necessarily FBO related. I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but we hosted the Northern Arizona Leadership Alliance, NALA. We had a board meeting in our hangar earlier. It was like August, I think. Brian got to come over and talk, and a bunch of the members got toured the airport, toured the control tower. Thought that went well. Labor Day weekend, we had the Flagstaff Symphony. A couple weeks ago, I had the Chamber's annual function. And then Saturday afternoon, I have, I can say, the Master Chorale. They bought 60 people singing in there and all that, and that's it. And we're gonna have to sit down. I probably said yes to a few too many things. I mean, I just got an inquiry for the Best of Flagstaff Awards. I said, how many people is that? And he said 500. I said, no way. So it's just way too many people. So we try to just, we really want to do just 1 a quarter, because for example, my teenager's in there right now undergoing a phase inspection, 6-year gear. So it literally has no landing gear on, sitting on jacks. I can't tow it out of the hangar, but we've got some aircraft tore down in there right now that it makes it a bit rough. The chamber loved it, and the choir people sound like they're going to like it too. But I like to maybe do 1 a quarter that's for the arts, or, you know, something like victim witness that's benefiting the community. I don't charge, and in the key sponsor, I usually write a big check. So it's not like it's some kind of revenue stream for me. Other than that, it really has, I don't know, I guess I'll just say, I'm very disappointed on the secondary property tax passing, because on businesses, it's a lot more expensive than represented. And that's gonna have to be passed through, what else to say? So, I don't have any questions for me.
Well, I was gonna ask you, weren't you looking at getting some more guys AP license, mechanics, because
Well, I was up to 5. We had to let one go. We still have 4. I'd like to have 6, but I don't know if I got enough room in the hangar to have 6 guys going all the time. Part of the problem, to be totally candid, is, it's hard to find good general aviation mechanics. I mean, you can find guys all day long, that are been working on jets and stuff like that. But I think I told you earlier in the year, one of the guys looked into you that pumped gas for me, got his degree, they couldn't find anything, so he really handy, so he got his AP from me, ended up getting a job down at Textron. Textron, like, that's Beechcraft, Cessna and all that. Part of the reason they hired him is because Cessna and Beechcraft were still selling piston-powered airplanes, and most of their techs didn't have his expertise on piston-powered airplanes. He's working mostly on turbines at this point, because, that's their book of business. But, so we have 2 young men that we hired out of AP school. They're from Las Vegas, and they're coming along nicely, but there's just that gap, and there's a lot of supervision that goes on. And then you factor in the cost of living here, they knew each other and they initially roomed together. And then I don't know what happened, but now one's got his own place, the other's got his own place. Good kids. But I had an interesting conversation with somebody the other day about, a lot of the businesses in town, I don't know, I say a lot, businesses in town are starting to buy duplexes and things like that to be able to provide affordable housing and attract the talent you need to run your business. Because I'm not telling anybody in this room, it's really expensive, especially if you're a young person. So, but I mean, we've had no problem handling the American call-outs. And trust me, we get plenty of them. So, I did one the other night that was like from 10 in the morning, or 10 at night till 4 in the morning.
What is that?
We signed a official on-call maintenance contract with SkyWest Airlines, where we promised to have a technician on call 24/7. Yeah, and that's hard to do when you don't have enough people and you got a lot of work going on in the hangar, and then, they go home at 4 and you expect them to come in at 8 a.m. and be all happy.
You need to build a little apartment.
Can't do that in the airport, but I probably already would. Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you. Is the traffic that you see over the FBO, is it corporate planes or private planes or outside of NAU?
Oh, it's a big mixture. I mean, the mix has changed, but honestly, one of the unique things about this location, and I ran in Glendale for a bank, 12 years ago for 9 months and stuff, and been in other locations, and obviously I fly with other FBOs. We have a pretty vast mix of traffic compared to a lot of FBOs. I mean, we see a lot of the light aircraft, right? But then we deal with a lot of corporate, private, military, medevac, fire. I mean, we're letting a crew stay down at the other facility right now. One of the helicopter operators who's here to kind of on call for while they do the burns. And then we got the airline. And I mean, honestly, it's a lot of hats to wear. I mean, you get down to an FBO, it's a Part 139 commercial sort of airport. They're probably not going to see the light mix aircraft we see. So I think we do a really good job of kind of juggling all that. I will say in the turbine market, you can see it like yesterday or the day before. I mean, we have a lot more Gulfstreams and stuff like that than we used to. And that's a whole nother set of challenges, which we adapted to, but like you have to have a potable water cart for that stuff, right? You got to have a lab cart big enough to service that in the airlines. You got to have, every one of those airplanes has a different tow bar head. A G650 tow bar head is not the same as a G750 tow bar head. And those tow bar heads are like $1,000 a piece. And then you got a piece of equipment and a tow bar big enough to tow that. And so you know, as you see that, and the other thing that happens is they're ramp hogs, all right? I mean, years ago, I wrote for Pro Pilot magazine when Murray Smith was alive, and he wanted me to write another article about as we were starting to see the bigger Gulfstreams and Global Expresses. I said, I don't have anything good to say about it. I said, they can fly across the country 3 times without buying fuel, and they're ramp hogs. They're huge. They take up a lot of room. So as you see that fleet mix change and get bigger, it provides more challenges in where you're going to park stuff. And that was part of the reason we changed all that parking a year ago, last January. So far we've been okay. But God forbid if that unannounced, you know, flight of 12 Blackhawks shows up. Because like we were supposed to have a C-130 Saturday, which would have been next to the Allegiant Airbus sitting there. We called the Marines and said, hey, have you looked at the weather? And they called us back and said, never mind. But yeah. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Curious to know, like the 24/7, like on-call maintenance. Like, obviously the preference would be to like have full-time staff and hire direct, but I was hearing that it was a lot of like, to be competitive in salary in a high-cost market, housing's a big issue.
Right.
I'd love to talk offline. We're working on a workforce housing project.
Yeah. Okay.
Me too.
You all are somewhere.
Well, they're building a bunch of houses over by my house.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
That road going in.
That's a bad topic.
I'm gonna put in to name that road the Purple Weisman.
That'd be a really bad idea.
Hey, thanks, Orland. Yeah, thanks for everything that you do for the community. You're kind of an unsung hero up here on the hill, so.
I appreciate it. But we live in a great town, you know, the more you travel, the more you realize just how great this place is.
Agreed.
We could just keep the Phoenicians down the valley. It'd be great. I
We got a
Okay.
plan here.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Adam, you're up. I want to hear how our chow hall's going, if you got some data on that.
We do. We're just gonna go over a couple today. So, last time we discussed about the TSA screen storefront. We had the issues, last Christmas Eve where the secure door failed. So that project, is still moving forward. We have already started pre-placing all of the containment, and they've already started bringing quite a bit of the materials needed for this project. What we were waiting on was our building permit, and we got that today. So the contractor is going to sign that. We're going to meet with them and come up with a schedule. Because we're getting ready to go into some of the busiest travel, we're going to have some very frank conversations. So hopefully by the next time we meet, we may be either done or close to done, depending on how those conversations move forward. The estimated time for this construction is going to be 1 month, and that's for the whole thing, including touch up. I think that it's actually only going to affect for a week or two, moving the queuing lines for the TSA around. I think they can get that pretty much done in a couple of weeks, but because of the secure nature of this particular project, we're having to do it in phases. We're going to do a first phase and a second phase. We won't put the man door in on the first phase and then the double door in the second phase. We are working with our TSA friends over there just from not only scheduling, but from a phasing standpoint. Like I stated on the slide here, construction dates to be determined. I should have something pretty much round out by the end of this week. And I have to give a big thanks to our budget team. This was not a funded project in our program. So we were able to work with our budget team where they came up with the funding for this, because this is a critical need for us out here. So that's it on the TSA screen storefront. Any questions? Nope. And the second one, snow removal equipment building, which is what I think you wanted to talk a little bit about. We've had quite a bit of movement since the last time we all met on this particular project. Not going to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but you may recall we did do a design. We did get it priced out on a draft GMP at $33 million. Was not acceptable from a funding standpoint. So what we did is we went through an exercise of right sizing. And by right sizing, I mean we looked at our current needs for housing our equipment and what we're looking at for the next, say, 5 years. If we're looking at doing purchases, we are, but they're going to be replacements. We're not adding to the fleet. That being said, we went through another exercise in concert with our design and our construction, our contractor, to say, okay, let's look at revamping this. Let's go ahead and figure out what some of the big costs were, like the earthwork was $10 million. What can we do from a design standpoint that will, number one, bring that number down? Number two, allow us in the future to expand on it. That's critical for us because with our growth, we may need to add more base to it. So we did just that. We got the plans to a 60% package. We gave it to the contractor to go ahead and price that out, and it came back. It came back starting with a 1 as opposed to a 3. At this point in time, we're looking at approximately 18.1 construction cost of the project as is. With that, they went out to a large number of subcontractors to get hard numbers. This wasn't just a building of this size with this type of complexity should cost about X amount. No, these are hard numbers. Hundreds of subcontractors. So we're real happy with that. We shared all of this information with our friends over at the FAA. They were very happy with, obviously, the direction we've gone so far. Typically, this type of structure does not score well from a budgetary standpoint, because what we have to do is we have to go for additional discretionary funding. We put all of our entitlement money and funding into this project for 5 years now, and then 4 years of our bill funding as well. Just try to get us closer and closer, because this is a critical facility.
What's the
Our-
square footage?
16,000. The where we are right now is the ADO, so our district office, is going to go ahead and go to bat for us, so to speak. So they have to come up with a justification as to why they're going to support this particular project, because again, it does not score well. We have their full support. They are going to go ahead and do that and champion for that project. So when you add all of the design costs and all of the utility costs, we're looking at approximately $20 million for the project.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yes, can you let me in the office next door? To talk to Missy.
Are you going for that sugar?
Key. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're fine. So we have shared all the information with the FAA. They're going to go ahead and put their discretionary ask in. Stacy BK Nags is working on that grant currently. And as of last week, we were told that we might get an answer by the end of December or early January. So if it all moves forward, if the stars and the moon and the aurora borealis all line up just right, we might be out there with shovels this spring. Going ahead and moving forward with it. It's very exciting times. It's moving very, very fast.
It's an FAA grant.
This will be an FAA grant. It's one of many. It's 3 phases. So FAA and then ADOT. They're also participating in it from a funding standpoint. So they'll share some of that burden with us.
I think we just approved that, right?
The second one,
Yeah.
phase 2,
Yeah.
yeah. So that phase 3 is going to be this discretionary ask. And full support from the FAA and ADOT on this particular project. It's exciting, very, very exciting. Next steps is the phase 3 funding for the discretionary request. If we get that nod come late December, early January, we're going to be moving full throttle. More to come on this in our next meeting. I can all but guarantee that, but everything we need to get turned in is turned in. Questions? Want to kind of keep it a little bit short just in that regard, but a lot of work's been going on. It's very exciting.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Yes. And one of the nice things is once we get this thing built, it'll also open up some hangar space too. I know we've got a pretty good size list. This will help ease that a little bit because we're currently having to store that equipment in hangars as well. Because of our obligations when we purchased that equipment with FAA funds. This will help relieve some of that. So it's exciting.
That'd be good.
Will you retain those buildings on the other side of the old ops building? In other words, will those be occupied or will some of that equipment move down? Don't you have a steel building south of the old rock building there with equipment in?
Oh, the old, where the old fire station where the,
Yeah, that's the old ops building.
yeah, we retain that.
Okay.
Like I said, I'd like this to be alive when it gets done, when you cut the road.
That's a big hope with government work.
I've been waiting for that thing.
Yeah, this project's been going on since 21.
Yeah.
Or
Well, then
maybe
that's
then-
fast. I'm sorry, I have to leave to meet the mayor. She demands my attention.
You're gonna miss our exciting air service update.
Oh, well, don't wait for
I
Brian.
got her number. You want me to text her and tell you to run late?
I already anticipated I was gonna run late.
I'm done, so if there's no further questions. Miss,
We can touch
Hear
base
that.
later, but it will be fast if you want to wait a
I'll
few
wait.
minutes.
you want to do communications right now?
Sure.
Are you okay
Go
with
ahead,
that?
yeah, go.
Well, it's our next. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah.
You bet.
Okay, and we'll go fast.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone that attended the opening of the Express Visitor Center. We were super happy to have you and we appreciate your participation. So thank you for doing that.
And Lori didn't cut anybody with the scissors.
Lord, no
I
one,
was warned so
no
many
one
times.
was
Stop.
injured. So that means that we'll be able to use them again. We were a
No
little bit
pending
worried about
lawsuit.
that.
Extremely sharp,
Extremely sharp.
brand new.
We'll keep this brief so we can hop onto air service and Lori can hear that. Here are some of our current advertising and marketing campaigns running in, both of those have been in Flagstaff Business News as well as Arizona Daily Sun in print and digital. I know when I read the Daily Sun online, I get served the airport ad that just got switched out to the holiday one, the first of the month. So we
I just lost room audio.
Are you able to hear us now? It looks like the audio may have disconnected.
Can hear you
I
now.
got you now. Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to hear us now?
Affirmative.
Yes.
Thanks, Brian. So this is in the Sky Dome and it will be up through next football season. So it was a 2-year ad buy and believe it or not, it looks even better in person. So
It's nice.
I appreciate if you go there, go check it out and makes a great background for a selfie. And then we also we're running ads on KNAU, so the radio. We have 4 versions of an ad running with a 5th holiday one being thrown in there. And then we have 5 mountain line buses going throughout the community. So if you haven't noticed them already, start looking at the buses and you'll notice them and then you'll start seeing them everywhere. So we're waiting on a little bit more availability for another ad to open up. We have one printed and then we'll put our final ones. We're looking to have 6 of our mountain line ads throughout town. And then wanted to provide another update on air service attraction. Brian and I just got back last week from Tallahassee where we met with 8 airlines. And then as we've mentioned before, in July, Lori went with us to the larger airliner conference, and that was Jumpstart. And there we met with 10 airlines, as well as one service, it's Landline, that provides a busing mode of transportation from airport to destinations. So this year alone, we've met with 12 airlines, which is certainly a new record for us. Here are the airlines that we've met with. When we sit down with airlines, we kind of start off with like, what do you know about Flagstaff? So we know kind of where to start if we're not located in the desert and where we're located, what our attractions are. And so I think the more conferences we've gone to, the more familiar people are with our area, and everyone has been to Flagstaff and they love it and it's beautiful and it's Grand Canyon. And then we always ask, did you fly Flagstaff? And most of them have. So people are familiar. And when airlines are kind of planning what a new route is, kind of like a puzzle. So it's based on where their hubs are, what their network connectivity is, so where they connect, the demand. So certainly if someone's grandmother lived in Branson, Missouri, and that's one flight that they want to fill, that's not a viable route. Where perhaps if you look at our passenger demand analysis, Denver, the LA basin, Chicago, Pacific Northwest are areas where we do have a strong demand. And then it's certainly based on what airline, their aircraft and equipment availability. So what would be the right fit for the numbers of passengers that we would have? Also, what would be the right fit for our elevation? And then certainly the hardest and most important is the staffing that they have to then fit in there. So it's a lot of conversations. When we were sitting at a table at one of these conferences, Tulsa recently announced Allegiant in Alaska, and I congratulated the gal, and she said, yeah, we've been talking to Alaska for 11 years, because the announcements were back to back, which if you were an airport, you don't usually tend to do 2 airline announcements. But so it is really kind of a long process and just about maintaining those relationships and being on their forefront. So I'm going to kind of give a very brief recap of how our conversations have been. And it is a little vague because airlines do kind of like to keep a little bit of their information close to their chest until they're ready to get it public. So certainly some of the information you can find online if you Google hubs and things like that. But certain specifics, they're not going to share until they're ready to publicly announce. So we'll start with American, which is certainly our incumbent carrier. Something that they are considering and are keen on doing is the possibility of larger aircraft. And airlines, I forgot to mention, they really plan like 9 to 12 months out. I think 8 to 10 months is kind of the sweet spot region. So airlines have opened up their books through the end of September. Some of them have, of 2026. So it's really, someone's not going to come in and start service tomorrow, unfortunately. It's kind of really that 6 to 12 month range because they have to open it, announce it, aircraft, and get it booked. So the exciting American update is the possibility of larger aircraft coming in summer of 2026. Between May and September is what they may be interested in. Alaska, with our current demand of where our passengers are going in their network. San Diego would be what they would be most interested in. But when they launch a new destination with their hub in Seattle, they try to tie something in with that. So if they were to launch a San Diego, it would most likely tie into something in the Pacific Northwest, like a Seattle region. Allegiant Airlines, we love to see them. If you follow us on Facebook, one of our, I think, most viral posts was recently of the Allegiant Raiders plane, bringing a team or taking a team, and everyone wants to know why Allegiant's here and why Allegiant doesn't do it and why we don't have our air service. So Allegiant's exciting. They're expecting flat growth in 2026, and they're evaluating what new markets they may be interested in entering 27, 28. So again, kind of that long term. Avelo, we met with in the summer. Since then, they have exited West Coast markets. So they no longer have anything on the West Coast. They're focusing on East Coast operations, and they fly larger aircraft, about 737s. Breeze is continuing to grow their West Coast hubs. They've announced a lot of new service recently focused on the West Coast. And they will be opening additional bases in early 2026, which could lead to a potential fit in the network to the LA basin or the Provo Salt Lake area. So we'll keep you posted on those conversations as hubs continue to open, and Breeze is an ultra low cost carrier that flies newer aircraft. So if you have questions about Breeze, they have a really nice website. Our conversations with Delta is really focused on the corporate travel demand. So we met with them last week. They will get with our economic development team and see if they're interested in kind of our business ties. As you all know, we're a tourism-based industry, but Delta really does kind of cater to that business corporate travel. So they were more interested in that information. Frontier, we met with in July. They opt for less than daily service on larger planes. They don't have any near-term expansions for Flag. Jet Suite X, which is a JSX, it's a private public charter that flies out of the FBO. Right now, they fly out of Scottsdale, and they fly smaller aircraft, so like an Embraer 145, which seats about 30. And then they're going to add some ATR turboprops, which could expand their market. But since it's kind of a private public charter, you do see higher ticket prices. It's more of a specialized experience. You don't go through the typical TSA. They have free drinks on board. They have Starlink, so it's kind of that higher level, which certainly caters to some clientele, but not everyone in our community. Southwest, they operate Boeing 737s, which have a range of 143 to 175 seats. So that would be certainly a lot of seats to fill right now. No short-term plans for Flag, but as their fleet may change, as aircraft ability shifts, they could fit into the network in the next 5+ years. So again, it's just kind of continuing to have those conversations, keeping them what's up to date in Flagstaff, keeping in front of them, so they know what's going on. We met with Sun Country, and this is the first time we've ever met with Sun Country. They are an airline based out of Minnesota. They're based out of Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. They fly larger aircraft as well. Theirs are 737s that seat 186 people. They offer less than daily service, but it is that Minnesota. So it would be a very specialized service that they provide, perhaps off season or shoulder, where they fly to Tucson, Mesa Gateway, as well as Phoenix. We looked at numbers since we haven't really met with them before, Minnesota numbers, and we'll still pull some information and share with them. But that's a pretty specialized area that Sun Country serves. And then we met with SkyWest. So SkyWest operates regional aircraft for United, Delta, American Eagle, and Alaska. So it's the branded planes that you would see as United Express, Delta Connection. Out there earlier, there was a SkyWest, but they're also the brand of the American Eagle, and then Alaska. And so SkyWest recently announced late this summer that they purchased 16 Embraer 175s that they'll operate. So SkyWest will operate as Delta Connection beginning in 2027, and having those aircrafts would open up a lot of connectivity in the Mountain West. So that's something that's really exciting with a lot of potential. And then they're also adding new CRJ 550s under Delta and United, which could open up possibilities flying under other carriers. And then they're doing firm delivery. So based on what contracts they sign, up to 44 additional deliveries, 2028 to 2032. So having the new aircraft on board and having them, since SkyWest is like flies regional aircraft, which is the perfect fit for our airport right now, it's really exciting that they're getting all the aircraft that then they'll be able to allocate. And they're based in St. George, Utah, so they're very familiar with the Mountain West and fly for a lot of Mountain West. And then finally, we met with United. They were not at this conference that we attended, but we were able to meet with them in July, and then we're going to request a meeting with them coming up in the near future. Brian will talk a little bit more about it, but they would be optimistic about resuming service if we were able to secure that small community air service development grant. So they would like that to help subsidize minimum revenue guarantees when they come in. And that program typically opens in the summer, and then the recipients are announced in the fall. We're waiting. It's still the fiscal 2024 funds, so the funds should be available. Certainly with the government shutdown, didn't check every day, but still checked very frequently. But we're optimistic with everything hopefully getting back in motion that grant application will open up. And we were on the short list. We've secured additional letters of support from airlines to support our grant, which makes our application really strong. So that's what we're looking at. Any questions on also extraction?
Can I make a comment, Claire?
Certainly.
For those that don't know, I think most of you do,
I have a question.
we're handicapped when it comes to this because of our altitude. So there's some airplanes that just can't operate out of here on a hot day, on our length runway, and that's the altitude, so forth and so on. But as I look at this, it just struck me over the years. American used to fly NEU charters. So we've had them in here before in like the 737s. And I think it was more so the Airbus. Alaska, when the Horizon was part of the Q400, they operated out here for 2 years. The Legion obviously has been operating out here for years now, the Airbus. They are switching to a 737 fleet, which is going to be kind of interesting. Avail was just in here on a charter twice. Frontier used to fly and use charters. So we used to have Frontier in and out here, not on scheduled service. Southwest has diverted in here several times. And Sun Country used to fly a lot of the football charters back in the day, and obviously United, SkyWest. And so it's kind of interesting. There's just a small number of those operators that actually don't have experience with this airport over the years. So, and a lot of their aircraft have already shown they can perform in there.
Well, as I say, because it obviously it's shown that the altitude doesn't necessarily impact that.
But
No, it does.
Oh, okay.
well, there's some seasonality to that as well. And there's some time of day considerations to that as well. And loading may be different for a charter than it is for a fully loaded commercial flight. So
Well,
essentially,
football charters tend to be heavier
correct.
because all the gear. So, yeah.
But really the worst time of year for us are the summer months. So early part of football season might hit a little bit of that, but the hotter days when the density altitude is higher, it's different for every aircraft type that's on here and every loading configuration they do. So it depends on the destination, how much gas they need to take, for example. But at certain density altitudes, they start leaving passengers behind, right? If you schedule it for the morning and it's able to take off, but your flight's delayed by a couple hours due to whatever factors, all of a sudden you might need to ask 10 people to leave up their seats.
And
to take their bags with them.
it's two performance issues. The first one is, we're at 7,000 feet. As the air heats up, as the air gets warm, it expands. So every day in the summer, in the middle of the day, we're running easily at 10,000 foot density altitude, which is why you don't see a lot of like Cessna 152s and stuff like that in the field. So that affects their takeoff distance. They have this accelerated stop distance they have to be able to meet. And, I explained to layman, you got these big fat air molecules. Yeah, get the same number of molecules into that pitot tube to register that speed. You're going a lot faster across the ground up here on a hot summer day than you are. So they need more distance to accelerate to and stop if they got a port. The second performance issue is second segment climb because they're taking off at basically already 10,000 feet. We do have some terrain, granted it's not that high, that if they have to shut an engine down right after rotation, they got to be able to sustain a certain amount of rate of climb per the FAA regs. You don't see that so much in like lighter aircraft, but so those are the things that sometimes it's just one and not the other, but they have to be both. And of course, some of these airplanes have got a lot of power. I was not an Airbus fan back in the day, but I gotta say they perform really well out here if we were just to be totally honest. But then you gotta have the load factors, some of these they aren't flying. But the other thing that's coming up is what we got used to here. When I got here, they were flying Beech 1900s, American West was every hour. Then they went to the Dash 8. And that kind of decreased the frequency in the terminal, because we were having this discussion at Bailey yesterday, why don't we have a restaurant? I go, because there isn't the people nonstop in there that there once was. Then they went to the CRJ, which less frequency, so you had less in between. And of course, then the flight canceled, it became a lot worse because everything bottlenecked. But, when the CRJ started here, we were like, wow, that's great. The Canadair regional jet is an old jet now. They're all getting pretty old. Mitsubishi actually owns the type certificate to it now. And so now we're going to be going into a whole other phase of regional jets, it looks like. So they would know better than us because they're going to these conferences.
That's the ask, right? So Claire alluded to the discussions with our incumbent American Airlines, and one of the concerns we brought up with them was that the regional jets are getting older, and we want to make sure we're positioned for, as those start to retire out of the fleet, that we're positioned for whatever comes next. And what comes next has traditionally been the Embraer 175s for most airports. Embraer 175s, if I'm not mistaken, use the same engines as CRJ 700, but they weigh a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit of a penalty there. They seat more people. They go from 65 seats under American's configuration to 76. So yeah, it's a 11-seat jump.
You know what it looks like? It looks kind of like a mini 737. It's got the wing, the motors on the wings instead of back.
United, and I believe Delta and maybe it's just United and Delta fly a version of those that have an upgraded engine that can go in airports like Aspen and Montrose and other places. American so far doesn't. SkyWest doesn't operate those on behalf of American. So we had those conversations about, well, what do the numbers look like? For a lot of months of the year, it doesn't really matter. We get operate with the standard E175. We kind of asked, can we get set up to accept those, even if it's not every flight, even if it's not every day, to be able to accommodate those. And then there is that discussion about mainline sometimes, right? Where in the summertime, our first Dallas flight in the morning does okay because the temperature's lower. If it goes, the second flight we were getting really can't go. They take off too many passengers to make it operate with the fuel load they need to take. So the question is, do we look at larger aircraft of an Airbus type, for example, for certain parts of the year? That's what we've kind of asked them to consider. So as Claire mentioned, something they were looking into. Obviously, there's expenses related to bringing in additional aircraft type. They need additional ground support equipment, additional training. So that's kind of been our ask, is to try to make sure that as those CRJs get older, we're still positioned well for the other aircraft that are going to be available in the fleet. And then similar conversations with the other carriers that we talked about there. The regional fleets for most of those are those Embraer 175s, with the exception of the CRJ 550, which is actually a really intriguing choice for us. CRJ 550s are CRJ 700 that's configured for 50 seats instead of 65. So they're really powerful. Like they really have no problem operating here. They're older airframes, but they've all been refurbished. So it's kind of a newer idea for those. And that's an interesting way that airlines have figured out how to put some of the contracts air carriers have with their pilots unions limit how many pilots can be assigned to aircraft of certain sizes. So that a lot of the airlines right now are full on slots for certain aircraft sizes. So for example, they can't add more pilots to 70 seat or 65 seat aircraft. So the answer is, well, we have spots available in our 50 seat, most of which has been retired. Or we'll allude to that upgauging, right? As planes keep getting bigger, Q400s have dropped off. We don't really have very many regional aircraft that operate in that 50 seat range. So it's like, well, what if we take a 70 seater and just remove 20 seats? And they'll have a little bit bigger first class, places to put your luggage. And now we can bring aircraft back into service to fill routes that we weren't able to fill because we weren't allowed to apply pilots to them. So that's kind of where we're in conversations. There's nuance to all of them, but it's sort of a general rule is that as aircraft become available, we're trying to be on their short list for places to add them. And the fleets aren't, from my perspective, from years ago being outside of the airline industry, I think the fleets aren't always as big as I thought they would be. Like sometimes you have this image that they must just have these thousands of aircraft, but sometimes you get down to it and it's like American has 32 A319s of a certain seat configuration, right? So every 2 to 3 deliveries of a certain aircraft type equal a new route, right? And so as a couple of those come online every year, we kind of want to be on their short list to consider. If, they bring between maybe 6 and a dozen online a year. Some of those go to fill retirements of older airframes, but some of them go to new routes, and we want to make sure they think of us.
And I think, I've been saying this for a long time now, but I've been almost 30 years and watched the evolution of each 19. The logical thing next is we are going to eventually have mainline. And it'd be totally candid that it's not going to necessarily be great for the FBO because they might be able to tanker from Dallas or wherever. Right now the regional jets, they can't round trip that. So, but I just think it's, we're a tourism based market. The airport's in a lot better shape to accommodate this kind of stuff. We're totally there yet, but I mean, I feel like we're behind as it is. I'm not blaming on anybody, but I'm just saying, I feel like we should have more going on here. We already do. So I think it's inevitable. You're going to see Airbuses or Boeings or bigger Embraers, whatever, flying in and out of here. It's just a matter of time.
There's helpful. I had no idea. All the things you have to consider.
And it doesn't help that summers are just kind of heating up a little more.
And really, we've talked a lot about the air service direction and the physical limitations of aircraft, but that brings up a whole nother set of issues that we'll probably save for a future meeting. That is something that we're adding to our budget request this year, which is one of our limiting factors is the capacity of our TSA checkpoint to accommodate passengers per hour and the number of people that can fit in the hold room beyond the TSA checkpoint. So right now we can hold a little over 200 passengers in there, which is great for 3 regional jets. But if you get to a point where maybe one of those is a larger regional jet or 2 of those, or you have a mainline aircraft come in, like we talked about, Claire mentioned the 737s that are in Southwest fleet. Those aircraft, some of them seat 175 passengers. So that one plane would fill up our hold room. So you couldn't have a Southwest plane and an American plane on the ground at the same time. We just couldn't fit passengers.
When the Vail was in here, I'll be honest, I mean, there was a time there, like with some country, we were seeing a lot of 737s. I haven't been around, like physically up working around it. And I was standing on our air stairs looking at that 737 that was here. Like, holy cow, this is a lot bigger than that Airbus 320. I mean, it's noticeably larger when you're like right there up next to it.
Terminal expansion might be on the future requests for, it's something we're gonna need to figure out sooner than later.
Better plan for it now, especially it's gonna take several years to get through the funding and everything.
Yeah, but it takes as long as our equipment building. Anything else on that one? Thanks. Okay. Up to you, Brian, for the government shutdown impacts.
Yeah, so this has kind of been a big topic. We've gotten some media requests about this. We've had requests from the general public, from city leadership. So we thought this would be a good time to share. We actually put this agenda item on there before we knew that the shutdown was going to end this week. So thankfully we'll have some positive updates on the end of this, but we do want to share what we've seen on the airport end in terms of impacts from the government shutdown, specifically here at Flagstaff. So the shutdown was officially over as of yesterday. I think today, the first day back.
And it's yesterday, what, last night?
Yeah. So longest shutdown in history, 43 days, beginning October 1st. It did have a pretty significant impact on airports across the country, especially in the last couple of weeks here. A few main areas we're going to focus on: air traffic control being one, the Transportation Security Administration being 2, and then the airport district offices for engineers and planners. That one I'm just going to cross off on this first list. We were very fortunate that we didn't see a lot of impacts for the federal employees that work for the FAA and the airport district offices. They're not all, that group has not always been considered essential. So sometimes they've been furloughed in the event of shutdowns. This time they were not furloughed. They did have some limitations on travel and things like that. There were some conferences we've attended with them that they would normally go to that they weren't at this year because of the shutdown, but they were working. So as Adam mentioned, we've been communicating with them on our grants, some equipment building. We've closed out some previous grants that we had on the books for some of the COVID relief funds. All that stuff's been ongoing throughout the shutdown. So fortunately for us, that did not have as much of an impact on us as it might have, and that group is still been coming to work. I did share their screen from the mobile version of our website showing kind of a typical day of what we've seen in the past week or so. And I'll go into more detail on the impacts, but you can see on our flight schedule there, some delays, cancellations that have been sort of the ripple effects of this shutdown.
There we go.
Regarding air traffic control, air traffic controllers are considered essential workers across the country. There's a few different ways that air traffic controllers are employed. Many of them are employed directly by the Federal Aviation Administration. Others, like ours here at Flagstaff, are employed in a tower that is owned by the Federal Aviation Administration, but work for a third party under contract. So the controllers that work here at Flagstaff work for a company called Midwest Air Traffic Control Services. They work on behalf of the FAA, so they're under contract with the FAA, not with the city. There's a whole nother group that are city-owned towers that contract with one of those control services, but since that's not the case here, we won't go into too much detail on that. In our particular case, our air traffic controllers did work throughout the shutdown. I do believe that there was a little bit different. I know that the federal tower controllers were not paid as part of the shutdown. I think that was not always the case for the contract ones. It sort of was up to the companies of how long they were going to pay them for. So I don't think there was quite the disruption we saw on some of the contract towers as there was in the federally owned and operated towers. But we did still see ripple effects from the nationwide staffing shortages that were related to the federally employed air traffic controllers. The biggest being reduced capacity, especially in major hubs. That's kind of been the story for as soon as we got a couple weeks into that shutdown. But that really came to a head about a week ago when they announced that there are going to be some FAA mandated flight restrictions starting last Friday, the 7th. Those flight reductions were going to start at 4% on the 7th and ramp up 2% earlier this week. They were going to be ramping up to 8% today and up to 10% by the end of this week. Fortunately, because of the government reopening, we kind of stopped at that 6% level. Those reductions affected primarily the 40 largest airports, but because air traffic is such a network, that really hits everybody, right? Like the aircraft, both our commercial flights plus a lot of our business and general aviation traffic fly from Flagstaff to those 40 largest markets. So we're affected on one end of the flight or the other. And adding to that, a little bit later on in the weekend, they also announced general aviation flight restrictions at the 12 busiest airports in the country, including Phoenix Sky Harbor. And actually, I think on the next slide, I've got some details on how that came about. So what we saw was pretty significant airline delays in the week leading up to the restrictions. That was a result of those shortages, right? So you'd have ground stops at airports that were struggling to keep up if they didn't have enough people up in the tower, which is, I think, what the flight reductions were sort of designed to meet, was to sort of help those towers catch up a little bit and not be so buried in flights. At Flagstaff specifically, we've seen one flight per day, both the arrival and departure side of the flight canceled on November 8th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th, and we expect those to be ongoing for at least a little while. So that led to, starting November 8th, which was this past Saturday, 12 of our 64 flights, that's both arrivals and departures, were canceled. So a 16% cancellation rate at flights in Flagstaff. You might notice that's much higher than the 6% traffic reduction, 4 to 6% we were talking about. And that's because we've seen a disproportionate impact on smaller airports, right? So airlines kind of have to make a hard choice. Network planning is really hard at the airport level, especially when you're trying to instantly, with a few days notice, cut 4% of your flights out of the market. And what we end up seeing is sometimes they're left with hard choices like, are we going to cut the 65-seater coming from Flagstaff because that's one flight into this big market like Phoenix or Dallas, or are we going to cut one 175-seat 737? And sometimes, unfortunately, the answer has been more disproportionately, we're going to cut the smaller planes to impact fewer people and keep the sort of hub to hub routes as intact as possible. The FAA rule, the emergency order, did include some provisions that they couldn't cut too much out of the small airports. They didn't want to see anybody sort of left behind entirely. So I think the airlines obviously tried to do the best they could, but a pretty challenging situation. But we did see that disproportionate impact on airports like Flagstaff. So that for just from the 8th through the 13th, that led to the direct impact of approximately 780 passengers in Flagstaff that would have been notified that their flights were no longer going to be served by the airline. Now, there's additional impacts from cancellations for connecting flights, right? So for every flight that we've had impacted, a flight from Phoenix to, like, let's say you were trying to fly to, I'll make an example of Eugene, Oregon, just hypothetically. If you were going to fly from Phoenix to Eugene, or Flagstaff to Eugene, and with a connection to Phoenix, there's a chance your Flagstaff flight could have been connected, and there's a chance your next flight could have been connected. So we actually heard from a customer that came to our office the other day that managed that their flight from Flagstaff was on time. And they got to Phoenix, and their remaining part of their routing basically fell apart due to flight cancellations. And so they flew back and they tried again the next day. So they were fine on our end, but somewhere else in the network, they were impacted by that. So those indirect impacts are really hard to measure, but we know that they're happening.
Brian, were they able to absorb most of those people into the other flights?
I don't think so. I think they were able to absorb some of them, but our load factors are running north of 80%.
I mean, I wasn't happy to see it, but I'll be honest, I was happy to see him cancel a Phoenix flight versus a Dallas flight. Because I think that's a lot easier to manage if you're traveling.
It makes sense.
They didn't
Yeah.
cancel.
Yeah, I don't know what percentage of them were absorbed. I don't think it was high because the load factors were pretty high to begin with. We do expect impacts to continue for another 1 to 2 weeks because, number one, they've already canceled some flights. They're trying to give people as much advance notice. And once you've canceled it, it's really hard. You can't just bring it back. There's not going to be anybody on that flight. And then the second is air traffic control staffing is not going to recover instantly. Right. So we have folks that maybe weren't hired because hiring was slowed down due to the government shutdown. We have maybe folks that retired or left. Maybe they sought other employment because they didn't want to wait around for their paycheck to come. some of those things are not going to be an instant fix. We do expect it to get better though, which I think I should cover either the next slide or the next one. Oh, we did want to talk a little bit about our response to this. So Claire and I were traveling at that air service conference last week when this news came out. We tried to be on the front end of this as much as possible in terms of messaging without jumping the gun, because news articles were coming out that the restrictions were coming before the order itself came out. So we waited until the order was official. That showed kind of that schedule of flight reductions. We did Claire shared some posts on our social media sites regarding some flight reductions, with mostly links to the FAA order and to American Airlines for what passengers could expect from the carriers. We have heard sort of anecdotally that American Airlines did generally a pretty good job of getting word out to their customers on the early end. So thankful that they were on the front end of that as well. So I did mention both the ground delays and general aviation flight restrictions in Phoenix. This is an air traffic map of today. So those red dots might be hard to read, but those are, this is an FAA website that shows they're actually considering these airport closures, because those airports with those red dots are closed to general aviation traffic right now, which is really unheard of. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that.
Not since 9/11.
Yeah, so this is still today after the government has reopened, but we're still seeing this closure. It's a very long list. Like sometimes you'll see one airport on the list for whatever reason. Horrible storm, construction. When you pull this website up, there might be a couple dots on there at certain times of the day. But to have this across this nationwide network is really unprecedented. So yeah, that was as of 2 hours ago that this was still showing.
I kind of, I was thinking about when this first came out, the two airports that we serve, there they are.
Yep.
So
the ground delays in particular have affected way more than we talked a lot about American, which was certainly impacted by this, both leading up to the flight restrictions and since, but has also impacted the FedEx flights in and out of Flagstaff on the Empire Airlines, the UPS flights in and out of Flagstaff on South Aero, and our general aviation traffic. I heard from our air traffic control tower in a meeting we had them earlier today that some of the cargo flights were delayed potentially 6 to 12 hours trying to find a slot to get into Phoenix. And some of them diverted to other airports in the Phoenix metro area to try to avoid having to fly into Sky Harbor. But even that's hard because Phoenix approach control is having issues. So it's not just Sky Harbor, it's sort of the airspace around Sky Harbor. The other thing that we've seen from the air traffic control tower is a service limitation from Phoenix approach controllers for visual flight rules aircraft. So for aircraft across the state, there's a lot of services that come out of the Phoenix metro area and the services that are at Sky Harbor, for example, Phoenix approach control. So two of the things that have not been allowed since these service limitations went into place is flight following, which is when you can request an approach control like Sky Harbor to sort of, even if you're flying visually and you have to fly out a flight plan, they'll kind of keep tabs on you as you make your way between airports. That was not available. Additionally, visual flight rules approaches was something that is often coordinated by the Phoenix approach for outlying airports throughout the state. And that was another service that was unavailable and I think remains unavailable at this
that's a
point.
big deal. We can consider the number of flight schools.
Yeah.
United bought 2 of them down there.
And even Prescott, I think, is affected by that.
Wow.
But there are some positive takeaways, right? So we talked a lot about the impacts, which have been certainly challenging, but I don't want to leave without highlighting some of the good things that we've seen come out of this or positive notes I think we can take away. One is that the air traffic control staff and the TSA staff continued working throughout the shutdown and remained professional. We did not see long lines at our checkpoints. Our checkpoint that the TSA placed here in Flagstaff was the same as it is on any given day, maybe even a little bit shorter in some cases because those flight restrictions came into place. They were very able to handle that. I know that it was hard for those employees that were going those 40 days without a paycheck, but everybody came to work. And I think for the most part, everybody kept very positive attitudes. Additionally, I think our community was very understanding and showed support for the affected workers. We had other employees throughout the terminal that, brought in snacks for the affected employees. I think people were generally positive and checking on people. I don't think we heard, at least I didn't in the admin office here, any complaints from passengers. We haven't heard of any arguments happening at the checkpoint or at the boarding gates. In fact, the only feedback we've received on sort of the airport communications channels has been positive. We've had some passengers that commented on how well the airline staff and TSA staff were dealing with a challenging situation and appreciated the customer service they were getting from those folks. So that's really positive. I think another positive takeaway is that the flight reductions nationwide were held to that 6% level. We saw the impact we've seen here with that 16% cancellation rate. That's at 6%. I'm really glad we didn't find out what was going to happen if it went to 10% nationwide. The FAA did announce today that they're pausing at that 6%. They're not going to reduce it until capacity in the network catches up, right? So that's that part of that lagging issue that I think we're going to see with the recovery. But we are starting to see some signs of the beginning of the recovery. So per FlightAware, there were almost 1,900 cancellations on Tuesday, 1,400 plus yesterday, and as of a little after noon today, we were still sitting below 1,300. So we're starting to see that hopefully trend downward. Like I mentioned, I think some of those are going to lag because they can't just reinstate flights that are already being canceled, but it seems like we're moving in a positive direction. So the hope is that, you know, sometime in the next 1 to 2 weeks, hopefully, especially before we get to the very busy Thanksgiving travel season, we'll start to see some improvement on that front. So I think that was all I had to share, but I'm open to any questions if anybody had any questions or comments about the impacts of the shutdown of the Flagstaff and nationwide.
Thanks, Brian, appreciate it. Okay, any comments from the commissioners?
I want to say it's nice. It's very informative. So, learning a lot.
Okay, I just want to mention, I want to thank Missy as the woman behind the curtain. Sometimes I don't think we forget about her doing her job because she's not visible, but thanks for that. I had a question about the council meeting and talking about the parking fees. Should we inform you guys if we're going so we don't violate the
Open meeting.
yeah, the open meeting, the quorum law?
That's a good question. I don't think you need to because it's a public meeting.
Okay,
And you're just there talking about that item. You're not going to be gathered talking about another
Okay.
item
so if more
or
than
anything else.
X of us show up, we're still okay.
Mhm. And you can certainly, they have a public comment virtually as well, or you can certainly fill out a form and go to the dais.
I can raise a comment. I spoke to somebody at the city about that actually, like if there was too many of us showing up, and they just said it really depends on how you identify yourself. So if you're gonna public comment, you're a person from the public, you're not commenting on behalf of the airport commission. And if you are commenting on behalf of the airport commission, then rules may apply, but they should let us know.
Okay,
And then it's parking and badging, so we want to include that badging part of it as well.
okay, anything else before we? Well, I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully you're not flying. Well, other than you, of course. Well, no, you'll be affected too, probably, won't you?
You know, I flew over to check on the boat 2 days before Halloween. It was actually my first official flight as Pine Cone 1.
Nice.
I forgot to talk about that, but.
Let's adjourn this meeting real fast.
Okay,
Yeah, but anyway, I was really surprised, honestly, going in and out of San Diego. You wouldn't have known. I mean, it was,
normal.
yeah, I was just sitting here thinking we should do a barbecue or something for all the Tower TSA guys. I just got that big giant smoker over there. So, you know.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
This is Commissioner Schaus, I'll motion to adjourn.
Second,
Commissioner
Commissioner
Hammer,
Carpenter, second.
okay. And all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Motion carries and we're adjourned at 14:20.
Aye all.
Thanks, everyone.